By the end of this video, you will have in your mind the foundation that future human society will be built on, and it is radical. You do not want to miss out on this information. Hello, welcome to the Immortalist. I am Cody Dean, and this is the goal to live free and to live forever. So many of you might already know a little bit about network states. If you're watching this channel, you're probably up on a lot of new things coming out. But for those of you who aren't, let me give you a really quick crash course of what network states are as kind of laid out by Balaji with the network state program. It's basically a new way of forming a country that's not warfare and conquest that we see throughout history. It's not a religious claim to land based on doctrine. It's actually a grassroots movement of people coming together for a common cause, and then from there, crowdfunding the purchase of land and becoming a sovereign recognized country. So it starts online. This is all made possible by the digital age. It starts online with a small group, and as that group grows, it can grow globally, and everyone has their income, so that's added and counted as the network state's GDP. And some people own property throughout the world, so that acreage can be added to the land mass that is associated with the network state. So as that grows and there's more and more of a community, that community can be kind of galvanized onto projects. And if that community can work together to get something done, then you have everyone kind of on the same page, and nobody is just kind of on the sidelines watching to see what happens. And when you have that, you start to have the development of a cryptocurrency that's internal to the network state or to the country. And you could also use blockchain technology that can help with transparency of governance, can help with voting for officials and authorities and things like that. And when that gets developed, you grow even more, things become more systematized, and you can start to get to a point where you can gain recognition as a global entity by other countries. And at that point, that's when you start crowdfunding and you purchase a central landmass. And from there, you develop your infrastructure, you develop a population, and then you can become recognized as a sovereign country by other countries around the world and by the UN. And the most popular network state out there right now, at least that I know of, is Prospera, who has an agreement with Honduras for a special economic zone. And there's pop-up cities within that. One of them is called Vitalia. So the network state idea, it's changing the way that society handles citizenship and how countries are formed and governed. And governance, that's a whole other beast. And speaking of that, if we look back over human history, we've had monarchies, we've had empires, we've had communist nations, socialist nations, democracies, republics, oligarchies. We've had all kinds of different forms of government ever since the dawn of human consciousness. But they're all built on one thing. They're built on the rule of man, which is very blatant in monarchy and empires, where literally a king or a queen or an emperor makes all the rules and laws and everyone has to follow that. But that goes all the way to even the more subtle forms of rule of man, which you find in democracies or republics, where the majority in a democracy, the majority has rule over the minority. So 51% of the population has the rule over 49% of the population. And so the challenge has been identified that not one of these forms of government really represents true freedom. So force and coercion exists in every form of government that has been tried throughout human history across all of planet Earth. So in democracy, 51% forces the 49% to consent to majority rule. And they do this by threatening force of fines, imprisonment, and if someone really wants to push it, it could go all the way to death or execution. And republic is kind of the same. However, in America, it's been found through time and application that force and coercion can more creep in more ways throughout society. And an example is, taxes. Many people, actually everyone, we all have to pay taxes, income tax and all that, but many people are not really willing to do so, but we're forced to under the threat of bigger fines, imprisonment, and eventually death. So there's actually never been a truly free society on earth ever, because all forms of government are based on imperfect men and women making rules, laws, and regulations for the benefit of themselves, for the benefit of the majority, or for the benefit of a minority group, via like social programs and things like that. So actually, there is actually a form of government that we could look at as total freedom, and that's anarchy. The problem with that, though, is people will live in fear of their fellow man because there's nothing to stop other people in society from robbing you, from murdering, from raping, and things like that. But this actually kind of highlights the point of the issue, which is force, fraud, and coercion. Because without protection against those things, force, fraud, and coercion, then people would still be in fear of others forcing them. Rape, fraud, scams, all that would be really rampant. Murders, if there's no check against that, no protection against that, then people will live in fear, and that's not a freedom state, that's a fear state. So we have to ask ourselves at this point, is it really possible to have a civilized society that is truly free? And if so, what does that look like? How does that work? Well, a little over a month ago, maybe it's closer to 2 months now, I interviewed a guy by the name of Wallace Hamilton. And we talked a little bit about something called the Prime Law. The first thoughts of the Prime Law, as far as I know, came from Wallace's grandfather and then was refined more by his father into its current form. And basically, what the Prime Law does is it establishes the right of every individual to pursue their creative passion, to pursue happiness, or to just live however they want to live without fear and being protected from any other individual or group or government who's trying to force them to do something against their will, or to scam them or commit fraud against them, or to use coercion to make them do something for fear of the consequences of not doing it. So the Prime Law, in my mind, is the ultimate form of governance by itself. And I'll put it up on the screen here so you can see it, but I'll read it too. The Prime Law, that's what it looks like. The Prime Law is the fundamental of protection. The preamble is the purpose of human life is to prosper and live happily. The function of government is to provide the conditions that let individuals fulfill that purpose. The Prime Law guarantees those conditions by forbidding the use of initiatory force, fraud, or coercion by any person or group against any individual, property, or contract. Article 1. No person, group of persons, or government shall initiate force, threat of force, or fraud against any individual's self, property, or contract. Article 2. Force is morally and legally justified only for protection from those who violate Article 1. Article 3. No exceptions shall exist for Articles 1 and 2. The Prime Law may not be amended. So, having read that and knowing the full content of that, how does that translate to society and governance? Let's look at the anarchy example. Anarchy seems like total freedom. The only challenge is people would live in constant fear of being taken advantage of or hurt or robbed because there's no protection against that. There's no one to stop the thieves and the murderers and the rapists. They're just allowed to run amok. So if you take that ultimate freedom of anarchy and add in just the protection against force, fraud, and coercion, then you really get a glimpse of what true freedom could be. You're able to do what you want, live how you want, to be free to go into business, to go into whatever field or industry you want, whether it be business, science, art, any of these things, and not be held back by regulation and red tape and things that aren't designed to help people flourish. And when you have a society like that, things advance so much faster. Science is able to come up with cures for diseases at a faster and faster rate. And industrialists and technologists are able to come up with new, innovative inventions and things that make everyday life easier faster and faster and faster. And that increases everybody's standard of living. So even if you make the same paycheck as you did before, now just because of freedom of innovation, your standard of living has skyrocketed. And this even goes to government too, because when I was reading that out of the law here, it's protection against any individual, group, or government against any individual, self-property, or contract. So not even the government of a nation could force its own people to pay an income tax or to go into the military if they don't want to, or any of these things. So the government would be reduced to protection only. The entire purpose of government is how can we protect our citizens, our constituents, from within and from without on the world stage. And that's the entire purpose of government. Aside from that, everything would be taken care of through the private sector. All the social programs that help minority groups at the expense of everyone else would go away, because it would be recognized that the smallest minority is the minority of one, the individual. And the prime law protects the individual. So everyone is protected on the same level and is allowed to have pure freedom. So the results of that is the freedom of industry. And the first industry we would use if we were to form a country is longevity. And through the longevity industry, with complete freedom there, eventually a cure to aging, eventually meaning way faster than it would now, because there's already people and researchers working on this. But it would happen so much faster that a cure to aging would come about, and it would be put into production and commercialized. It would be affordable for everybody, and it would be available to everybody. And I think that should be the first industry to experience this level of freedom, because that literally saves everybody's lives. But then it serves as the most quantifiable example of true freedom that could spread across every industry. Then everything else would want to experience that as well, would come to whatever place that is doing that, to experience that same level of freedom. Which, by the way, the most important project that I think is going on in the world right now is called the Immortalis project. And that's why I brought up network states at first, because Immortalis is a network state. It's in the early stages, but it's governed by the prime law. And its end result goal is to have a physical country on the world stage, governed by the prime law, giving freedom to all industries, but putting initial focus on the longevity industry for the purpose of curing aging. Then everyone will see that. Everyone will want to, all the businesses, all the scientists, all creative people will want to come to that country, Immortalis, in order to experience that freedom and be set free to create. So we're working to establish a recognized sovereign country in the world. And this is going to give everyone an extra level of freedom of expression. We have the First Amendment in the United States right now, which is the freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom to petition. And that sounds great, but if you look in America right now, there is censorship out there. There's people who are shut down on YouTube and other platforms for saying things that go against the current narrative. And, that's not freedom of expression. So in a protection-only society, we would have true freedom, and no one would be tied down to, well, I have to go along with what the majority says because it was voted on and the majority says this, even though I disagree. You're free to pursue your life the way you want to pursue it, and you are protected to do that. So once Immortalis proves that model through the longevity industry, it's going to spread around the world. All creative people around the world, particularly the innovators, the scientists, the creative businessmen and women, they're going to see this example in the longevity industry of how quickly someone can come up with an idea and a cure or a concept or whatever, and bring it through all the trials that are necessary, and then get it produced and commercialized and bring the prices way down, where there's competition from different companies who are working on it. And in that, the end result product is going to be better and better and better because there's so many competing companies. It's going to be better and cheaper than anything created anywhere else in the world. And people are going to see that. They're going to move to Immortalis, or they're going to see the model that Immortalis has created and proven, and they're going to use that same foundation, that same model, the law, the constitution of Immortalis, and they'll use that where they are, and governance around the world is going to shift. So network states is the next evolution of how countries are going to form and are forming currently. And the prime law is the next evolution of governance. So if you combine those two, we have a societal paradigm shift that's going to usher in something that's never been seen before. And the time is now for it. If you want to help on this project, there's a few things you can do. The easiest thing is like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video and other videos on the channel everywhere, because that spreads the word. And you could also go to joinimmortalis.com. You can find more information about the Immortalis Network State Project. You can become a part of that community, and you can contribute there. And you can donate. That's always helpful. Obviously, Network State is a grassroots crowdfunding of a new country. We need capital. We need reserve capital so we can buy a country. So if you can, consider donating. Until next time, this is Cody Dean, and you are the Immortalist.